Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Madeeha Sagheer from Department of Zoology, University of Education, Bank Road Campus, Lahore. So, students, today we are going to discuss about the topic of evolution principles of systematics. Well, this course is mainly led by Dr. Muhammad Mudassir Shahzad from Division of Science and Technology, UAE Lahore. The topic which we're going to discuss today is the Darwin's theory of evolution. Well, Darwin has talked a lot about the evolution. He actually gave the mechanism of evolution, that how evolution takes place. We will talk about his ideas of evolution and especially that of the natural selection. In his theories, in his publications, he never ever used the word evolution. What he noted that species change over time, especially in response to the new habitat. So, today our focus will be his ideas of evolution. The introduction of Darwin. Who was he? What was his life history? Darwin was born on 12 February 1809. Many members of his family belonged to the field of medicine. His father was a physician, his grandfather was also a physician. So, like his family members, his father wanted him to go to and join the field of medicine. He was since his childhood he was very interested he and attracted towards the nature. His hobbies were collecting and hunting birds and collecting dogs. So he was, since his childhood, he was, you can say, a naturalist, right? But because of his family pressure, his father wanted him to become a doctor, so he was sent to the Edinburgh School of Medicine. So, where he started his medicine degree, but what happened? He did not bear the sight of the pain, and he was not at all interested in medicine because at that time medical field was not that much developed, and he couldn't see the blood, and he was once he what happened, he witnessed an operation of a small boy. So that what he could not bear, and ultimately he quit his field of medicine. Voyage on HMS Beagle. Voyage, the travel through sea is known as the voyage, and HMS Beagle was the name of the ship. So, after spending 2 years at medical college, finally he quit the field of medicine and he got back. And later he was enrolled in Christ College for the training of the clergy as a clergyman, but he got his degree. He was honored with the graduation at that time in 1831, but still he couldn't find the way out. He was not at all interested what he was doing at in his life at that time. So, as nature gave him a chance to become a naturalist, um, and during the time which he spent while completing his graduation at Cambridge, he got a chance that he there was a botanist whose name was John S. Henslow, and he nominated Darwin to serve as a naturalist on an expedition that was travel around the world through via HMS Beagle. So let's read it out. During his stay at Cambridge, Darwin developed keen interest in collecting beetles and made valuable contributions to the beetle taxonomy. This was a stay at Cambridge at that time when he was getting the training of the clergy. One of the his Cambridge mentors, a botanist by name of John S. Henslow, nominated Darwin to serve as a naturalist on a mapping expedition that was to travel around the world. Expedition, to travel in searching of something, in mapping, this traveling is known as the expedition. Charles Darwin served as a naturalist on 5-year mapping expedition HMS Beagle, which set on sail on December 27, 1831. So he served for 5 years. If the Beagle set on sail 1831, the Beagle returned back in 1836. Okay, during his traveling through HMS Beagle, he got ample opportunity to explore the world because it was the tour around the world. He got the opportunity to explore the tropical rainforest, fossil beds, volcanic peaks of South America, coral atolls of the South Pacific oceans. Well, you know that tropical rainforests are the ranges of forests that are located near the equator of the earth. They are the moist places. Fossils are what? These are the remains of organisms, including both animals and plants. Especially, these are the hard parts of the, in the form of the hard parts of the organisms that lived long, long ago on this earth. And coral atolls. What are the coral atolls? Coral atolls are the actually coral reefs, ring-shaped coral reefs. You know about the coral, these are the invertebrates, these are cnidarians. What they do, cnidarians, they excrete calcium carbonate, and for they build small rocks that are known as the reefs. So coral atolls are the coral reefs actually, ring shaped coral reefs. So he explored that, he got the opportunity to explore them all. But what was the most important part of his expedition? That was the visit to the Galapagos Islands. If we talk about the location of the Galapagos Islands, then they are located 900 kilometer off the coast of the Ecuador. While Galapagos Island, he spent there almost 1 month there, almost 5 weeks, and he noticed there that there is the variety of the animals, and including tortoises and birds that seem to be different from the mainland. So let's read it out. He noticed that different islands seem to have slightly different varieties of the animals. He visited different islands, and he noted that islands have the same organisms, but their morphology is somewhat different. Galapagos actually the word Spanish word that means tortoises. So this is very famous for having a very, very big, heavy tortoises. Well, as we have talked in our previous slide, that Galapagos Islands are named after the large tortoises that inhabit these islands. If we talk about their size and age of the tortoises, then they weigh up to 250 kgs, and their shell diameter is around 1.8 meter, and their lifespan ranges from 200 to 250 years. So they have a very, very long lifespan. What Darwin did, he noticed the differences amongst these tortoises. Main differences are present in their were present in their shells, and as well as in their length of their neck. Here, if you can see that these are the different patterns, shell patterns of the tortoises. These were the different. Otherwise, these tortoises were very much similar to each other, as well as to the tortoises that inhabit the mainland. Well, tortoises, he noticed that tortoises that are present on the dry regions have longer necks than those that are present on the wetter regions. Yes. Darwin also explained some of the differences that he saw in dry regions where vegetation was sparse. Well, in dry region, tortoises didn't get the vegetation on the ground, so their short neck wouldn't be favored, and in that environment. That's why in dry regions where vegetation was sparse, tortoises with longer necks would be favored. Definitely, they were favored because they could reach higher to get food. If they have the longer neck, so they can get their food easily. And the on contrast, if we talk about the tortoises that live on the wetland, or the moist regions, that where short neck is okay. Longer necks wouldn't be so necessary, because the short neck tortoises could live easily, could survive, because they can get their food with the help of their short neck on, because food were amply present on the ground. Okay, and other most favorite organism that Darwin studied a lot were the sparrow-like birds. Later, they were called as the Darwin finches. Early finches encountered many different habitats and evolved themselves according to the habitat. Well, these finches have adaptive radiations. They have evolved themselves, especially their beaks, according to their dietary adaptations. Whatever they feed on, their beaks evolved according to that. Here you can see that this is the main seed eater finch. Further, it is adapted to five different kinds of finches, difference in their structure of their beaks. Here you can see that birds or fruit eating finch, grubs eating finch, tool using finch, insects, and leaves eating finch. Seeds eating finch has a broader beak, and like fruit and birds eating, because seeds, fruits, and birds are something that needs to be chewed or to be grinded. So they have some strong and broader beaks. Here you can see a very lean, sharp beak. This kind of finch used to have grubs in its feet, means it feed on the caterpillars. So its beak adapted to its diet. A tool using finch, here you can see that is a long thin tool in its beak. Insect are very soft food, so they have neither very sharp long, neither very broad beak. And same for the leaves. Okay, here you can see that there are the 14 species of finches that arose from the ancestral group. Ancestral group were actually the seed eater finches, and these 14 finches have been adapted from the ancestral group that belongs to the South America, mainland of the South America. Each species is adapted to the specific habitat on different islands, including the Galapagos Island as well as the small Cocos Island that are very near northeast to the Galapagos Island. Here you can see easily that this ancestor fish have been divided or adapted into the different species, different 14 species. These are the 14 species, including plant eater. And these two are the insect eater finches. These are the finches that use tool um, while having their food. And these are the seed eating finches. These are the cactus finches. They feed on the cactus plant. And these again, which I told you earlier, are the insect eating finches. So in total, they are have been divided or have been radiating into the 14 different kind of species from the single ancestral finch. On the origin of species, this is the very very famous publication made by Darwin, and in this publication he has formulated actually the theory of evolution, especially the theory of evolution by the natural selection. Darwin was just 27 years old at that time when he back from the expedition, and rest of the time of his life he spent in examining the specimens that he has collected from his expedition, and he reading and writing the notes and observations, and finally he made um, a publication, and that name is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, and this was published in 1859. First time this was published in 1859. Okay, so far we have talked about the Darwin life history, and then about his very famous voyage on HMS Beagle around the world. So we have talked about all of this. Why? Because this is all related to his theory, to his concept of evolution. Whatever he studied by visiting the Galapagos Islands and the other islands and other parts of the world made him or helped him to build the concept of evolution and to propose the theory. Darwin's theory of evolution, a mechanistic process, because according to Darwin, evolution is a mechanism. It is a step-by-step process that takes place, and ultimately species or organism evolve. So Darwin's theory of evolution is based on his ideas. He had ideas that on which he made a theory of evolution. So we will be discussing these ideas one by one. First one was the common descent. According to Darwin, the species or the organisms or the variety we are having today have the same parents or same ancestor. They have been originated from one or a few common ancestors, right? So Darwin hypothesized that new species could appear gradually through small changes in the ancestor species, as we discussed in our previous slides about the finches, that one there was probably there was a one ancestral finch, that is the eater finch, and that have been descended from that seed eater finch for into the 14 different species of the finches. So according to Darwin, organisms have almost the common parents. This is what is called common descent. Next is the gradualism, because he had the idea after studying the nature that the process of change in an organism or in the society, in the population, in the species is not very fast. It is very slow process that is being taken place within the organism, then in the population, then ultimately into the different generations. So it is not the fast process. Okay, while Lamarck felt that species-wide change could take place within a span of a few generations, Lamarck was actually thinking that evolution is a very fast process. He thinks that it has taken place in within a span of few generations. But according to Darwin, evolution was a much slower process taking place in innumerable small steps, right? So, based on this and on the ideas of Scottish geologist Charles Lyell, he was the geologist, and he estimated that Earth, and he thought that Earth would be too much older than we think. So, at the same time, when Charles were working, his contemporary theories were that Earth was not as much old, but according to Charles and Charles Lyell's idea that Earth is very old, this idea, the next idea of the Darwin's mechanism of evolution is the population speciation. Well, every population, according to Darwin, undergoes the changes, or every population evolves and ultimately becomes a distinct species. So, this is what is called the population speciation. So, this portion of Darwin's theory states that within a population, change in a species occurs as a balance of hereditary characteristics shifts across that population. So, uh, the favorable traits are being inherited to the next generations, and ultimately with a very very slow process, gradually it will result in the formation of the new species. Population becomes a distinct species because its organisms are evolving slowly. Well, this idea of the Darwin differs from the Lamarck's idea, because Lamarck's think that every individual of the population undergo the same change. But according to the Darwin, change is not same for every individual. What happen if we take the example of the giraffe? According to Lamarck, all giraffes living under tall trees would develop long necks. But according to Darwin, some would randomly born with long necks, and this trait, as it is a very favorable trait according to the long tree environment, so it would gradually spread throughout the population and becomes the heritable trait. But according to Lamarck, all giraffes would have the long necks, and all giraffes would have the long necks that are living under the tall trees. Okay, natural selection. This is one of the most important idea of the Darwin, on which he proposed another theory, that is the theory of evolution by means of natural selection. What is natural selection? Natural selection is simply is the adaptation of the individuals or population to their environment. They adapt themselves to survive better in the environment, and they adapt themselves to survive better to produce offsprings is in that environment. So this is what the natural selection. Nature selects the best organisms to survive. If we come to the proper definition of the natural selection, then we could say that all species of organisms arise and develop through the natural selection of small inherited variations that increase the individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce. So, the variations that the individuals adapt because of the change in their environment are inherited variations. So, these variations inherited to the next generations, generation to generations, and ultimately results in the speciation and the evolution, right? So, natural selection is often called the most unique part of the Darwin's theory. As we are talking about the Darwin's theory, we are taking Darwin's theory as a mechanism of evolution. So, this is one of the important step in that mechanism. That is the natural selection. Competition, also called the struggle for life, had been thought of as a reason that a given species might succeed or extinct. It depends on the competition that which species will be succeeded and which species will be extinct. But Darwin extended the understanding to change within a species. This I what I told you earlier, that Darwin talked about the change that is taking place within the species. If we continue with the giraffe example, so we can see here in this picture that the giraffe that adapts their neck according to their habitat when there was a scarcity of the grass on the ground. Some giraffe would probably have the longer neck, can reach the trees to get their food. So this trait will be inherited because it was the best trait according to the environment. And inherited, here you can see that the giraffe with the longer neck could have its food from the tall trees, while the other giraffes couldn't have. So these giraffes, because of the malnutrition, could not survive. Ultimately, long-necked giraffes would survive, and this long neck trait will be passed on to their next generations, and this cycle continues. If you can read here, to continue the example of giraffes, when a giraffe is born with a longer neck than its fellows, it gains an advantage because it is able to reach more food. The long-necked giraffe is therefore stronger, lives longer, and more likely to have offsprings, and the cycle continues. Okay, and today we have talked about the Darwin's different mechanisms, different ideas that Darwin has given as a mechanism of the evolution. We have talked about the common descent. We have talked about the gradualism or change in species over time, population speciation, that how the new species evolve within a population, and finally the natural selection. Well, the natural selection is that idea that becomes another theory, the theory of Darwin's theory of evolution by means of natural selection. Theory has the further postulates like overproduction, competition, variation, heritable variation, or adaptations. So we will talk in our next lecture about the natural selection, about the Darwin's theory of evolution by means of the natural selection. Thank you so much, guys. This was all about the Darwin's concept of evolution, Darwin theory of evolution, which he have talked about in his publication Origin of Species by means of Natural Selection. Have a good day. Have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.